Welcome back to Hypnosis by Design. It's great to have you with us again.
Yes, welcome back, everyone.
Today's exploration is a bit special. It actually came about from an assignment your host here, Denny Van, gave us.
Oh, right. That was an interesting one.
It really was. The task was to summarize a very rare, out-of-print book, How to Develop Psychometry, The Power to Interpret the Soul of Things by W.E. Butler.
A fascinating read. Definitely not something you find easily these days.
Exactly. So we're hoping this deep dive will, unlock some of that forgotten knowledge tucked away in its pages.
It offers such a unique perspective on psychic abilities, doesn't it? Ideas that maybe aren't discussed much anymore, but are still incredibly thought-provoking.
Absolutely. And the core of it all is psychometry. This ability to read the story within objects just by touching them.
Tapping into the history, the feelings, the essence of things.
It's like giving a voice to things that can't speak, right? The name itself comes from the Greek. Psyche for soul and metron for measure.
Measuring the soul of things. It's quite poetic, actually.
It is. Okay, so let's dive in. Where does Butler start us off?
Well, he kicks things off with that common saying, if only these old walls could talk or objects could tell their tales.
Right, we've all thought that.
But Butler flips it. He says, well, they are talking. Every object is constantly broadcasting its story through these imprinted vibrations, like a magnetic tape, he says.
A magnetic tape. Constantly recording. I like that analogy.
Yeah, and while we don't have a literal tape player for objects...
Unfortunately.
Right. Butler suggests some people have a kind of sixth sense. They can tune into these vibrations, these impressions, and bring them into conscious awareness.
And those are the psychometrists.
Exactly. And the book introduces some early researchers who tried to understand this. Professor Denton, for example.
Ah, yes, the geologist. With his sister.
That's the one, Mrs. Ann Denton Cridge. Apparently, she could hold geological samples, even if she didn't know what they were, and get these vivid mental pictures of their history, just by holding them to her forehead sometimes.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. He wrote a book about it.
He did, The Soul of Things. It strongly suggested objects hold onto their history in a way some people can sense.
Though didn't the book mention something about potential telepathy later on?
Yeah.
Between Denton and his sister?
It did, yes. Butler acknowledges that possibility was raised for some experiments, but he's careful to say it likely only affected a small part of Denton's overall research. It didn't discredit everything.
Okay, that's important context. Who else was mentioned?
Dr. Rhodes Buchanan. He did experiments with students holding vials of drugs.
The vials of drugs. How did that work?
Well, the vials were just numbered. The students didn't know what was inside. But some started feeling the physical effects of the drug in the vial they were holding.
Just from holding it,
Yeah.
not ingesting it.
Just holding it. It suggested some kind of influence beyond just, suggestion or the vial itself.
And there was a story about a general, too, right? General Polk.
Yes. During the American Civil War, he apparently got a metallic taste in his mouth just by touching metal, even in the dark. Little anecdotes like that really make you wonder.
They really do. So Denton actually coined the term psychometry.
He did, based on his work. But, as Butler points out, the word kind of get co-opted by psychology later on.
Right, for measuring mental processes, intelligence tests, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So it's important for our listeners to remember, for this deep dive, we're using Denton's original occult definition, divining information about an object or its owner by touching it.
Got it. Reading the history of objects, not psychological testing.
Precisely. And this ties into things like psychometry meetings you might read about.
Where they'd put objects in separate containers to avoid mixing the vibes, so to speak.
Right, trying to prevent mixed influences. But Butler notes, even that isn't foolproof.
Which brings us to that story about the lady and the letters.
Yes, the perfect example. She tries psychometry in the dark, picks a letter randomly from her desk, tries to read it.
And gets nothing related to the person who wrote that letter.
Correct. She's disappointed. But the next day, she puts the letter back and notices the one next to it in the drawer.
And realizes all the impressions she got were actually from that letter instead.
Exactly. The stronger imprint from one object apparently influenced the one beside it. Shows how these subtle energies might interact.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a reading actually unfold? Bill gave an example, right? With a ring.
It did. An imaginary reading of a ring supposedly from one of Nelson's sea captains.
What kind of things came through?
Impressions of the sea, a wooden warship, cannons, the feel of the era. then focusing on a man, the captain, blockading a port, maybe in Spain or Portugal.
It sounds so vivid.
It illustrates the potential for objects to hold that kind of detailed history.
And the person receiving the reading confirmed parts of it.
Yes, confirmed the ancestor was a sea captain in Nelson's time. And interestingly, the ring had also belonged to a Renaissance bishop before that.
Wow, multiple layers.
And the reading even touched on the current owner's life financial worries, a big decision.
Which leads to the idea of different levels in a reading.
Precisely. Butler breaks it down into three. The primary record, the original owner.
Okay.
The secondary level, later associations, like the sea captain.
Right.
And the tertiary level things related to the present owner, maybe even glimpses of the future. He suggests all three are usually present, just in different amounts.
So where does all this information actually come from? That's the big question, isn't it?
It really is. The book dismisses collusion, faking it in most genuine cases. Like, it wouldn't explain everything.
So what's left? Telepathy. Reading the owner's mind.
That's often suggested. And maybe it plays a role sometimes. But Butler argues it's just swapping one ESP type for another. And crucially, what about information nobody living knows?
Good point. That happens in some cases, right?
Documented cases, yes. Which pushes towards a more expansive idea.
Like a pool of knowledge. Or cosmic memory.
Exactly. This concept that there's some kind of universal information field that psychometrists can somehow access.
That resonates with Carl Jung's ideas, doesn't it? The collective unconscious.
It does. Butler connects it directly. That deeper layer of the subconscious linking everyone, holding shared knowledge, archetypes.
Jung believed parts of that could surface into consciousness.
Right. And the book then explores the more occult interpretations of this.
Okay, like the astral light.
Yes. Described as this immaterial substance underlying physical matter, holding the memory records of all life on the planet, and acting as a channel for, universal consciousness.
Sort of like a cosmic database.
You can think of it that way. And it connects to Eastern ideas, too.
Like Akasha, the Akashic records.
Exactly. Similar concepts of divine life, cosmic memory. The astral light is sometimes seen as a reflection of the pure Akashic records, maybe a bit distorted by our collective thoughts and emotions.
But the core idea is that humans can potentially connect to this, because we're part of it.
That's the empowering part. Our individual memory is just a tiny piece of this huge universal archive.
So Denton's definition to reading the soul of things fits quite well here.
It does, and occult traditions talk about this planetary memory being held in the reflecting ether.
The reflecting ether. And that might even hold glimpses of the future, reflected from the divine mind, the true Akashic records.
That's the idea presented, though the clarity, the accuracy would vary greatly depending on how clear those reflections are. It's not like watching a movie of the future.
And the book even links this to ancient Egyptian ideas about judging souls and the Book of Revelation.
It draws those parallels, yes. Suggesting these concepts might have very old roots, thinking about records, actions, and judgment. It's definitely food for thought.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. What about the abilities themselves? Are they rare gifts?
That's the common view, isn't it? That only a special few have psychic gifts. But Butler challenges that.
What does he propose instead?
He argues these are faculties we all possess, just developed to different degrees, like musical talent.
Ah, okay. Some are prodigies, some seem tone deaf, most are somewhere in between and can improve with practice.
Precisely that analogy. And he looks at history for evidence.
Like the Gnostics, early Christian groups.
Right. They claimed direct spiritual knowledge, often using psychic faculties, but focused on contacting spiritual beings, not necessarily spirits of the dead like modern spiritualism.
And other groups too. Early Christians, Quakers.
Yes, the book mentions historical accounts of spontaneous psychic events in their worship, usually attributed to the Holy Spirit, not the deceased.
Interesting. And there was a point about St. Paul's gifts.
A linguistic point, really. The Greek word often translated as spiritual gifts is apparently closer to psychic gifts, psychos pertaining to the soul or psyche, not spirit in the way we often use it. Paul saw humans as body, soul, and spirit.
So the potential is there, like musical ability. But why isn't it more common or accepted?
Well, the book points to historical tensions, particularly within Christianity, where some viewed natural human faculties, including psychic ones, with suspicion.
Leading to suppression, maybe? Less encouragement to develop them.
That seems to be the implication. And this leads to another really important point Butler makes.
Which is?
He strongly debunks the idea that having psychic ability automatically makes someone spiritual in an ethical or moral sense.
Right, that's a common misconception, that if someone is psychic, they must be wise or good.
Exactly. And Butler says, look at the world of psychism. It clearly shows that's not always the case. It's a faculty, not a measure of character. This misunderstanding has a long history.
So if we're all connected through this collective unconscious, constantly swimming in this sea of thought and emotion, as he puts it.
Then it becomes really important to have your own internal compass, right?
So establish your own values, your own code of living, before actively trying to tune in to all these psychic impressions.
Yes. Otherwise, you risk getting swept away by the mob mind, the collective noise. It's about discernment.
It links back to that ancient wisdom. Know thyself.
Perfectly. Bringing psychic stuff into consciousness lets you evaluate it against who you are and what you stand for.
And the book suggests there are guides, people who hold this ageless wisdom who can help.
It does, yes, in both East and West for genuine seekers. But the main point is that psychometry itself is an interesting power, potentially valuable if used well.
But training makes a difference.
A big difference. An untrained faculty might be erratic, but training brings reliability, control. Though he notes there's resistance to studying ESP from some corners, psychologists, religious thinkers.
Because it challenges established ideas, or creates uncomfortable overlaps between, say, sacred and secular.
Seems to be the reasoning discussed. It can feel threatening to existing frameworks.
Okay, so if someone is interested in exploring this, what about the practical side, the preliminary training?
Right. The book really emphasizes building a foundation first, and it boils down to 3 key things: observation, attention, and concentration.
Why those specifically?
The idea is, look, your subconscious is recording everything anyway, physical sensations, psychic vibes, the lot. But to bring the fainter psychic stuff into your conscious awareness, you need to train your mind to notice, to focus.
Makes sense. And keep the exercises simple.
Very much so. Don't overcomplicate it. Observation is just consciously paying attention to what your senses are telling you.
And attention is directing that focus where you want it. Concentration.
Pretty much synonymous in this context, being able to fix your attention deliberately. And Butler pushes back against the stereotype of psychics being vague or impractical.
Right. He says this training actually makes you more focused and practical in everyday life.
Exactly. It's beneficial all around. And he also warns about that false spirituality thing again.
Where people put psychics on a pedestal.
Yeah, hero worship, followed by disappointment when, guess what? The psychic is human and has flaws. Training helps the psychic develop their own mental mastery, not depend on others' projections.
Because that focused mind can better register and sort the incoming psychic impressions, which might be quite subtle at first.
That's the goal. And with practice, those impressions can apparently become incredibly vivid, even more so than visible sight or sound sometimes.
The book mentioned how modern life can kind of dull our senses. Conditioned reflexes, autopilot.
Yeah, contrasted with needing sharp awareness for survival in nature. He suggests bringing some of that focused awareness into daily life could even reduce accidents.
Makes you think. What about specific exercises? Kim's game.
That's mentioned. Observing objects on a tray, then recalling them. Good for attention, though some find it hard. Steady practice is key.
But he offered something even simpler. The think shoelace exercise.
Yes. I love this one. It sounds almost silly, but it's profound. When you're doing a simple everyday action like tying your shoelace.
Just focus entirely on that. No think you at emails or dinner.
Exactly. Feel the lace, watch your fingers move, concentrate fully on that one simple act, resist the mental chatter.
It sounds almost too simple.
That's the point. Like Naaman in the Bible being told to just wash in the Jordan River. Simple things can be powerful. And you can practice this anywhere, anytime. It builds concentration muscle.
And this extends to observing your commute. Really seeing the familiar streets, the people.
Yes. Challenge yourself. What details did you actually notice today? How many people just drift through on autopilot?
And observing people doesn't mean staring awkwardly.
No, quick, focused glances are enough. He tells a story about a hypnotist.
Oh, yeah.
Who apparently glanced briefly at a textbook page, then had a hypnotized subject recall and lecture on it perfectly. It's the intensity of attention, not just the duration, that matters for imprinting things in memory.
Intensity over duration.
Okay.
So we've done the groundwork. What about the first steps into actually trying psychometry?
Right, the practical bit. The book knows people might jump ahead to this.
Guilty?
Understandable, but it does reiterate. Doing the preliminary training alongside this is best, even if it adds a bit more strain. The disciplined mind gets better results.
And it uses the term sensing for the initial stage.
Yes. That first general feeling or impression, the clear pictures or sounds often come later. Don't expect full movies right away.
And all perception, physical or psychic, comes from the same basic root, with touch being fundamental.
That's the idea presented. Our eyes touch light waves, ears touch sound waves. It's all variations of sensory input creating impressions in the brain.
So beginners shouldn't be discouraged by just getting general feelings.
Absolutely not. In fact, the book mentions that very advanced practitioners might move beyond clear images to a more formless perception that yields even more info, though they can still use images if needed. But that takes a lot of time and aspiration.
Some people might lean towards form psychometry, sensing through shape and texture.
Yes, that's mentioned as a possibility. But even with images, there's always an underlying sensing that's key for interpretation.
Okay, preparation for a reading. Comfort is key.
Definitely. Loose clothes, comfy chair, feet flat, hands relaxed. No crossed legs, apparently, for energy flow.
And the breathing and relaxation exercise.
Simple, but effective. Sit comfortably, breathe deeply and slowly. As you exhale, scan your attention down your body, consciously relaxing each part from head to toes. Do it maybe half a dozen times. Aim for overall relaxation.
Then choosing objects. Friends can help.
Yeah, if they provide objects and can verify your impressions later, ideally don't know too much about their personal life beforehand to avoid biasing yourself.
And objects have two kinds of memory, inherent and gathered.
Right. The object's own basic history, materials, etc., that's inherent. Then the gathered memory from human contact, emotions, thoughts, that's usually more complex.
What are good objects to start with?
Necklaces are often good worn close, personal. Letters, once out of the envelope.
What's harder?
Rings, tiny objects. Keys are usually bad, too many handlers. Washable things lose their imprint. Gloves might work if turned inside out first.
And the book suggests starting with a letter.
Yes. Remove it from the envelope first. Then try different holds. Palm on it, fingertips on the signature, holding to the forehead. See what works for you.
Preferably from someone you don't know personally.
Ideal for practice, yes. Then you make a conscious act of will and intention to read its record.
Like a trigger, telling your subconscious to let the info through.
Exactly. It's a simple mental command. Then you just wait quietly.
For what? Feelings? Pictures? Sounds?
Any or all of the above. Simple impressions, vivid images, inner sounds. Describe everything, no matter how small, to your friend acting as recorder or use a tape recorder.
Be open to everything, pleasant or unpleasant.
At first, yes. Don't filter. But if something feels too negative or overwhelming, put the object down. Break contact physically or just by intending to.
And be aware of potential distortions, like the owner's recent stress overwhelming other impressions.
Yes, discrimination is needed even early on. A strong recent emotion from the owner can create a very dominant layer.
And thoughts can feel like real events.
That's a key point. Thoughts imprint strongly and can be misread as actual occurrences. Clairvoyants face this two distinguishing thought forms from other things.
Impressions might come slowly or quickly.
Can vary a lot, a slow dribble or a fast flow. And a strong personality often leaves the strongest first sensed layer.
Sensing health conditions is common too, even feeling pain.
It happens. Again, break contact if it's unwanted. The book says it will cover more refined techniques later, tuning into specific aspects, breaking specific contacts, but master the basics first.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the final thoughts in the book's postscript?
Some really important wrap-up points there. Big emphasis on truthfulness, avoiding self-deception, keep records.
Including the failures.
Especially the failures. You learn so much from what doesn't work, or what you misinterpret, and a strong warning against gossip.
Why gossip specifically?
Because careless or malicious talk about psychic experiences really puts off intelligent, thoughtful people from exploring the subject seriously. It damages credibility.
Good point. Then it talks about becoming more selective.
Yes, moving beyond just passively receiving, actively seeking info. One way is asking a mental question, maybe visualizing it, going into a sort of misty sphere with starry points.
And one point becomes significant, yielding answers.
That's the technique described. Another is using key symbols.
Symbols linked to ideas, like Mercury for intellect.
Exactly. You create a personal link between a symbol, like an orange circle with Mercury symbol, and the quality you want to explore. The book mentions Kabbalah and the Tree of Life as established systems for this, but stresses personal connection is key.
You have to make the symbol meaningful to you.
Right. You can use existing systems like the Tree of Life as a base or create your own. Same with color symbolism.
Personal meaning is more important than standard interpretations.
That's the advice. Develop your own scale based on experience. Don't just assume bright colors are low and pastels high. Use your reason and intuition.
What about flower psychometry?
Yeah. Used in public demonstrations sometimes. Someone brings a flower they've focused a question onto. The psychometrist reads the flower.
And the theory is the flower's aura is relatively blank, so the person's thoughts stand out more easily.
That's the idea. It's a simpler canvas compared to an old object with tons of history. Good for practice, but Butler encourages moving on to more complex objects and using key symbols for deeper info.
Keep experimenting, basically. Don't get stuck at one level.
Always. And personal experiments are often the most fruitful. The book also touches on that debate. Are you reading the object's aura, like a scent trail?
Or accessing the universal mind through the object.
Right. Butler leans towards the universal mind idea based on his observations.
Then it gets into charged objects, objects deliberately imbued with energy.
Yes. By human will, or even, the book suggests, non-human or superhuman intelligence, it mentions angels, fairies, acknowledging modern skepticism but stating the possibility. It touches the borders of the magical.
How should you approach those?
Cautiously. Like a chemist sniffing an unknown substance. Be receptive, but also hold a positive intention to understand, not just be passively influenced.
Like that seagull analogy. Hovering against the wind stillness, requiring effort.
Exactly. And there are two types. Some work by autosuggestion. Others have inherent power. Those need real care. Be cautious with objects people give you, especially if they know you're sensitive.
What about blessed or consecrated objects?
If done properly, the influence should be positive, keyed to a high ethical level. Still, approach with that receptive but positive mindset. Don't just passively absorb.
The book suggests an exercise for charging objects. With a friend.
Yeah, get a friend who visualizes well. Have them charge marked pieces of wood with different strong emotions images, keeping a record. Then you try to sense the emotion on each piece.
To practice identifying specific energies.
Right, and that skill can later help you sense the atmosphere of places.
It mentions personal psychometry, too, reading people directly.
Briefly, advises against doing it widely and always have a third person present for ethical reasons, clear boundaries.
And other uses. Spotting fake antiques or jewels.
Hints at those possibilities, yeah. Encourages you to devise your own experiments.
How did the author wrap up?
Expresses satisfaction in sharing decades of experience, aiming for a non-sectarian view of these faculties as natural senses, separate from morality, and throws in a final thought about the Russian Revolution changing its stance on sexual ethics.
As an example of how perspectives can shift dramatically over time.
Seems to be the point, just a final, broader thought on changing views.
Wow. Okay, so that really was a deep dive into Butler's How to Develop Psychometry. Quite a journey.
It really was. It covers so much ground, pulling together history, theory, practical exercises. A really unique resource.
Absolutely. And it's been a real pleasure digging into this rare book and sharing these fascinating insights with you, our listeners, here at Hypnosis by Design.
We genuinely hope it's given you a glimpse into knowledge that might otherwise be hard to come by.
Definitely food for thought. We hope you'll take some time to reflect on these ideas, maybe consider the potential of your own perceptive abilities.
And here's that final provocative thought to leave you with, something the book really brings home. Just consider, as you go about your day, how the unseen memories, the subtle energies held within the everyday objects all around you, your chair, your desk, old photos, jewelry, how might they be quietly influencing your feelings, your perceptions, maybe even your choices?
Oh, that is intriguing. Definitely something to mull over.
It certainly is.
Well, if you found this journey into interpreting the soul of things as fascinating as we did, please do subscribe to Hypnosis by Design on your favorite podcast platform. We love exploring these kinds of topics.
And if you know someone who might be intrigued by psychometry or just enjoys exploring the less traveled paths of human potential, please share this deep dive with them.
Likes and shares always help others find the show. Thanks so much for tuning in today.
Yes, thank you for joining us.